When the four-stroke era kicked off in 2002, it was huge for MotoGP. We had legendary bikes, massive manufacturers joining the sport, and some of the most amazing and incredible racing the sport had ever seen. But fast forward to 2012 and that vibe completely changed, with manufacturers and teams dropping out because the sport became far too expensive. MotoGP had to do something to make sure the grid didn't go to 10 to 12 bikes. That's where the CRT era comes in. But what actually were these bikes, and why did MotoGP had to bring in the claiming rule teams just to keep the sport going? How's it going? It's The Natural and welcome back to another video on this channel. In today's video, like I said, we're going to be diving into the CRT era. Now, to understand why MotoGP had to bring in the CRT era, we have to go all the way back to 2008. Back in 2008, MotoGP had some of the most amazing battles on and off track. If you were watching the races, they looked fantastic. Seeing Valentino Rossi and Casey Stoner have some amazing battles, one of them being at Laguna Seca in 2008. But off track, the sport was in financial meltdown. Why, you may ask? With MotoGP going to the 800cc era for the 2007 season, the idea was to make the bikes slower. Instead, what it did was make them more expensive. The electronics and tech were getting far too complicated and too expensive that it was getting completely out of control. Then the global financial crisis hit and big sponsors left the sport. And one of the biggest Japanese manufacturers in Kawasaki dropped a huge bombshell announcement that they were leaving the sport before the 2009 season even started. For one season only, Hayata Racing Team was made for contractual reasons, meaning it was a skeleton version of the factory Kawasaki team, and it only had one rider in Marco Melandri for the 2009 season. He used a Kawasaki Ninja ZXRR, which he got, and also the team's best result of the 2009 season, finishing second at Le Mans. By 2011, the sport got even more bad news, as another big Japanese manufacturer followed Kawasaki out the exit door in Suzuki. As in 2010, Suzuki went from having two bikes in the grid for the 2011 season just to having one bike with Alvaro Bautista. They announced after the 2011 season was over that they were ending their MotoGP project. With two massive manufacturers gone from the sport in 2012, that only left three manufacturers left on the grid, as in Ducati, Yamaha and Honda. If another one was to leave, just like Kawasaki and Suzuki, the whole sport would have been in huge, massive danger. With a grid of only 10 to 12 bikes for an elite sport, that is MotoGP. So the sport needed a solution that didn't cost a lot, and that is where the CRT era comes in. It began in 2012 when the sport needed more bikes on the grid without needing a factory budget. So the previous ownership, Dorna, took a huge massive gamble by putting CRT bikes on the grid. Now if you're wondering what these bikes were, think of them as hybrid bikes. Instead of prototype bikes used by the factories, the CRT bikes were production engines. These were based on street bikes that you can buy, like the Aprilia RS V4 or the BMW S 1000 RR. These teams would take these engines and bolt them into custom-made prototype chassis. Built by specialists like Suta or FTR, it was a total mix of parts. So you had street bike power inside a racing frame, creating this hybrid machine that was cheaper to run than a factory Honda or a factory Yamaha, but it still looked like a MotoGP bike. To make sure these hybrid bikes could actually compete, the sport gave them big, massive advantages. While the factory bikes were limited to 21 litres of fuel and 6 engines per season, the CRT teams were allowed 24 litres of fuel and 12 engines per season. This meant they could run for the whole entire race without wear and tear, or running out of fuel. Then there was the most unique part of the whole entire setup, the claiming rule. The sport introduced a rule that any official factory teams can actually purchase a CRT team's engine and gearbox after a race for a fixed price of 20k euros. It basically worked as a budget cap. The idea was to keep the playing field level and ensure that these bikes stayed within a reasonable price range. If a team started using parts that were specialized or too expensive, they risk another team claiming that engine for a fraction of what it cost to build. Even though it was a big part in the 2 years of the regulations when this class existed, no one ever actually bought an engine. It ended up being a clever way to keep the class affordable, to focus on independent racing and make it one of those unique chapters in MotoGP's history. Even though these were budget machines, the racing at the front of the CRT era was still good. But the real story is how these riders shaped their whole MotoGP careers. First, there's Aleix Espargaró. On the Aspar Aprilia, he was on another level to anyone in the CRT era. He spent 2 years outperforming bikes that should have been way faster than his. The performances earned him a factory Suzuki seat for the 2015 season. He was an important part in bringing back the iconic manufacturer back to the sport, even taking pole position at Barcelona, the first pole position since Suzuki came back to MotoGP. Aleix brought all that CRT grit and Suzuki experience over to Aprilia, eventually taking his first ever MotoGP win in Argentina in 2022, along with Aprilia's first ever win in the MotoGP class. That year, he proved that he wasn't a mid-pack rider, he was a championship contender. Best example was at Assen. After getting knocked into the gravel by Fabio Quartararo on lap 5, that dropped him all the way to 15th place. He single-handedly put out an unbelievable, probably the best ride I've ever seen him ever do in his MotoGP career, carving through the field and doing one of the best overtakes I think I've ever seen ever at Assen, a double overtake to finish 4th place. It was a performance that showed he still had the underdog spirit from 2012. He built that Aprilia team from the ground up, turning them into a winning machine that could fight for a world title. Then you have Danilo Petrucci. His journey from the CRT era is like something you would see in a Hollywood script. He started at the very back on a Iota Suter, which pretty much was a joke of a bike. But his work ethic caught the eye of Ducati and he climbed all the way to the factory team. The highlight he had was Mugello in 2019. In a freeway battle with him, Marc Marquez and Andrea Dovizioso, Danilo held his nerve to take his first ever Grand Prix win, his first ever MotoGP win in the Premier class in front of the Italian fans at probably one of the most iconic circuits you can do it, Mugello. He proved that starting at the bottom in the CRT era, pretty much a back marker, to a double MotoGP race winner and a Dakar stage winner. Danilo Petrucci is the ultimate proof that on any bike in MotoGP, persistence always pays off. And last is Michele Pirro. He took a CRT bike to a 5th place finish that still is the best finish ever for a CRT bike at Valencia in 2012. That ride proved that he had the incredible technical mind to be up there when the bike shouldn't be. It's no coincidence that he became the lead test rider for the factory Ducati team. He's been very important for over 10 years, helping them turn a struggling manufacturer in Ducati into the most dominant bikes and the most dominant manufacturer that we have seen in the sport for a very long time. Michele Pirro has gone from a rider just making the numbers in the CRT era to turn Ducati's bike into winning championships and dominating the sport for many years, making the Desmosedici bike one of the best bikes we may have ever seen in history. By the time 2014 rolled around, the CRT name was officially gone. The class was evolved into the open class and eventually the concession system that we have today in MotoGP. Looking back, the CRT era was made out of pure desperation. It was a bridge to keep the sport alive when manufacturers were walking away. It gave us bigger grids and riders a career in MotoGP. And it forced the sport to find a way to make racing affordable again. A lot of people, including myself, hated these bikes and the racing in this era. But the truth is, without the CRT bikes, the sport we love, the sport we watch, the sport we go and see live could have been in a bad way today. We went from a dying grid of nearly 10 to 12 bikes to having the closest racing we have ever seen in the sport's history. At the end of the day, the CRT era was a massive gamble. But it was a massive gamble that 100% paid off. That is why the CRT era was one of the weirdest eras in MotoGP. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our MotoGP content. I hope you have a safe and great day, and I'll see you guys in another video.